Thanks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the West Hollywood COVID-19 webinar. It's going to start in a few minutes and allow more people to join the webinar. Okay, great. I think we are ready to begin. So here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Paulo Kesperdet with the City of West Hollywood, and welcome to the West Hollywood COVID-19 webinar series. Today's topic is accessing mediation services for commercial tenants and landlords. The City of West Hollywood has issued an emergency executive order aimed at assisting businesses and workers and has produced a toolkit for businesses affected by the coronavirus crisis. Information is available at the city's website by going to www.weho.org/coronavirus, where there are links to small business resources. For today's webinar, we will have Tara Warden, the city's business development analyst, to go over the commercial eviction moratorium. Then Jen with the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce will go over the mediation services and the intake form, followed by introductions of both of our mediators, Kim and RJ. Before we begin today, though, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to all those who registered. Additionally, the recording of this webinar will be available on the city's YouTube channel, as well as going to www.weho.org/coronavirus, where you can find this webinar and all of our past webinars in the webinar series. Please use the questions tab that is located on the right-hand side of your screen to ask us any questions pertaining to this presentation. Additionally, there is a current poll that is up on the polls tab, which is also located on the right-hand side. Please answer the questions of this poll so we can see real results in real time. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tara Warden, the city's business development analyst, and she'll go over the commercial eviction moratorium.
Hello, thanks, Paulo, and welcome everyone to another edition of the city's COVID-19 webinar series. I'm going to quickly go over the ordinance to just give a baseline review and understanding for everyone on the webinar today, and just to make sure everybody has a good grasp on what the ordinance entails. So the ordinance was the temporary commercial eviction moratorium for tenants impacted by COVID-19 is the full long title. It was initially adopted by our city council on April 6th and then was amended again on May 4th. The coverage it applies from March 16th, so post-dated to March 16th, which is the day of the countywide I think Paulo just sent out the fact sheet. So if you see a message on your screen, you'll see a link to the fact sheet. You can click that and that will open in another tab. So you'll have that as a resource to follow along with. So again, the ordinance is effective from March 16th to July 31st. And tenants that are eligible for the protections if they can provide information demonstrating a loss of income. And again, if a tenant suffered a partial loss of income, the tenant must pay a prorated share of rent that corresponds to the income generated during the rental period. Rents must be paid back within 6 months of the expiration of the local emergency. And I know that there's been conversation around, we don't know when the local emergency will end or how long this is going to extend. And I know our city council has been very receptive to hearing from the business community and addressing the needs directly through measures like this. So this could change and this could adjust in the future. But this is where we are right now. Next slide, please. So just the key takeaways for tenants. If you're a tenant that's been impacted, you must notify your landlord within 30 days after the rent is due of your inability to pay. And this is an ongoing obligation to provide documentation during the local emergency. So if you experienced an impact to your business in the month of April and you know you can't pay May's rent and it's likely that you're not going to be able to pay June's rent, you may as well go ahead and notify your landlord and continue to stay in touch with them throughout this process. It is incumbent upon the tenants to provide accurate and understandable documentation that demonstrates their inability to pay. As promptly as feasible is what the ordinance states. You are permitted to have 90 days from that first day of, say, May. You have 90 days to prove that you cannot pay May. So it's future dated. And if tenants only suffered, again, I've mentioned this before, if they suffered only a partial impact, they must pay the prorated share of their rent that corresponds to the impact that they experienced. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so some key takeaways for landlords. Landlords will receive all deferred rent within 6 months of the expiration as it stands now, unless they have agreed to a payment plan that extends beyond the 6 months. And this is something that, you know, the spirit of this ordinance was to make sure that everyone is working in good faith with one another. And if a landlord has the ability to extend that rent payment period, that increases the likelihood that the business will stay in place. And that would be sort of the goal for everyone involved, including the city, as we all are dependent upon each other for our economic success. Landlords cannot charge fees or interest of unpaid rent during the local emergency. Any non-payment of rent cannot be grounds for eviction during the local emergency or within the 6 months of its expiration if the tenant is paying the current rent and also the back rent. And then one last thing is the landlords can request adequate documentation. Adequate is not onerous documentation to support the use of this extraordinary protection. And the city is working on a letter to provide to landlords in case they are having difficulty paying their mortgage, that they would be able to send the letter to the bank that they have a loan with, and hopefully explaining some of the terms of what their impacts are. Next slide. And key takeaways for everyone. So just a reminder, I mentioned this, that these are unprecedented times for an unprecedented public health crisis, and we know that everyone is impacted to some degree. We expect everyone to operate in good faith, and that's, you know, as simple as paying as much as you can, being amenable to lease agreement changes, and really listening to one another and responding to the needs of both the business community and the residential community. The landlords are encouraged to work out payment plans with your tenants. This is not a time to evict your tenant. You're likely not going to have space or interested businesses in renting, so it is best advised to keep your tenant in place and work with them to get to terms that are agreeable for both parties. And I'll just close saying this: we all have a vested stake in our future, so let's work together to get through this. #WehoStrong. And with that, I would like to pass it along to our West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Genevieve Morrill, who she has been integral to the city's response and recovery process right now. And I know she's been on probably 20 Zoom calls already this week. So here's for another one.
Thank you, Tara. I think all of us have been on all of those calls. I think my sister, who's an educator in Tacoma, is beating me on Zoom calls. So it's all around us everywhere. So welcome everyone, and I want to thank the City of West Hollywood for this partnership and this amazing opportunity to provide a complimentary service for you. I know that you're all struggling right now, and we want to find a way to help. So we're going to go through right now the process of how you would sign up for these mediation services that have been explained. And then after I explain how we go through the website and the intake form, I'm going to introduce you to two fabulous women who are our wonderful professionals that are going to be our mediators that you choose from our mediation service team. So before we introduce you to RJ Mulligan and Kim Deck, I want to take you through the website. I think that it was also just sent to you in the share by Paulo. So as you see, you'll go to WehoChamber.com/mediation services. If you go to WehoChamber.com and you go to the COVID-19 resources, there's a drop down, takes you to mediation services right at the top. So we're already on the mediation service page. So we're gonna scroll down. It's gonna give you the program overview as Tara just explained. You have the ordinance. You can click on the ordinance. You can get the full ordinance there. You or your attorney or your partners can read that. And then the addendum that Tara pointed out, which has extended it to the end of July. Your eligibility to be a part of this mediation, to have a complimentary mediation, is that you must be a business located within the City of West Hollywood boundaries. The landlord does not have to be within West Hollywood, but in terms of his or her office, but the actual business tenant must be located within West Hollywood. As we mentioned before, this is a complimentary service. Mediation services average about 3 to 4 hours per session. We want everybody to get full use of this service, so we are restricting it to that amount of time. Should you not be able to resolve your issues within your session, your mediation session, you can certainly contract directly and negotiate with your mediator to continue your mediation service directly with your mediator. They have their own companies as well. So there's disclaimers that you will look at. There is a survey we're going to have you do, but most importantly, what do you want? What do you expect out of this? What is the expected outcome? And one of the things that the city did when they created this ordinance is they, instead of creating a very specified ordinance on every type of documents you should have and what the amount of times, that they gave some broad strokes of times. Now, what you're going to find is that your paperwork or the financial documents that a landlord might require, you can negotiate with him, or during the mediation process, you can decide what are those financial documents that are going to help prove your financial hardship. So that's something that's not determined within the ordinance itself. Also, what's determined as the revenue. How do you determine what that is, et cetera? Your timeline and your schedule for payment. How do you determine what time frame? Now, the city's giving 6 months, but I've talked to a landlord who said he'd give a year. You might negotiate a longer time frame. That's the beauty of mediation. You can find consensus, work with each other to try to find the best possible way for you to survive, for that landlord to be able to pay their property tax and all the other things that they have to deal with and their maintenance, so that we continue to support each other as much as we can. And then your payback, like I said, the amount of payback, the length of time. We're hoping that also during this time, the landlord and you as the business owner can find a way, or you as the landlord can find a way with your tenant to come up with a reasonable amount of percentage of rents right now. If there's no income coming in, what does a tenant do? If a tenant has a little bit of income because they've pivoted to a portion of their revenue, then you can negotiate what those are in this program. The program is completely confidential. It's going to be done through a video platform like this. You will schedule your mediation. Down below the time frame here, we talk about if you've never done a mediation before and you want to know what a standard mediation is, you can click on the California code, which is below the time frame there that Paulo's pointing to, and you can check out what the code defines as a standard mediation. The other beauty of a mediation is your confidentiality. All of this is confidential between you, the parties that are negotiating, and your mediator. None of this is reported back to the chamber or the city. One of the things that the city will require from us as the chamber is just the number of mediations that were done and the statistics of those. Were they resolved? Were they unresolved? Etc. So they're not going to ask for any proprietary information or what you negotiated. The other thing that you'll negotiate with your mediator is what kind of agreement you're going to come up with at the end of this, so that you have some sort of solidified agreement at the end of this, whether it's incorporated into your lease or whether it's just a separate document. Those will all be defined by the mediation process. Anything I've forgotten, I'm sure our mediators will pick up the slack for where I've left off. But I think confidentiality is key. It really is. We want to give you a comfort level that whatever you do is secure, and whatever is proprietary is not shared with anyone. There are concerns sometimes with public government. Things are public record, and that's why I think the city has contracted with the chamber so we can keep it separate, and everything is funneled through directly with you, between you parties and the mediator. We have other resources below. I'm going to take you through the intake form, though. As I said, you can go to the past webinars and the fact sheet that Paulo sent out. But let's go to the intake form now and tell you how it works. So you're going to go to this sign up for mediation and click that sign in here. You're going to go to the intake form and give us your email address and the date, etc. You're going to tell us who you are, who's requesting this, who's the tenant, who's the landlord, depending. All of that various information that we need to contact you. If you have legal counsel, if you have an attorney, you're welcome to bring them. And if you want to provide that information, you can. It's not required. And then we have our mediators here. We have their full bios and websites that you can check out, not just on the intake form, but also on the previous page on our website, WehoChamber.com/mediation services. And if you don't, if it doesn't matter who is chosen and you just want the first available, just pick no preference. We're happy to give you that. We want a brief understanding of what your issues are. We want to understand if you've tried to resolve those issues. And we want to understand if there's any, if people are agreeable or not, and then explain, give us some sort of explanation. And then we have some rules and regulations. We want you to make sure that you read and understand, and then you submit that form to us. Once that form comes to us, we will then pass it on to the mediator of choice, and they will take it from there and set up confidentially and privately a meeting with you and the parties and have conversations with you. I think I covered all of that. From there, the mediator will schedule, and then we'll provide you a link for they'll set up the meeting and the date and the link. I'm going to just turn it over now, and because I think anything I missed, our mediators can fill in the blanks for me. And so I'm going to start in alphabetical order here, and I like to say first on deck because her last name is Deck. So Kim Deck has a company called On Deck Mediation, and she is one of our mediators for our service. So Kim, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Welcome. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, the City of West Hollywood, for providing such a positive and helpful process for landlords and tenants. I think it's terrific. So let me just sort of tell you first off, in its essence, if you haven't been involved in a mediation before, it's fairly simple. It's a confidential, facilitated negotiation. And obviously there's all kinds of nuances, but that in its essence is what it is. And I know that RJ and I hope to be as helpful as possible to help each of the sides, or the landlords and the tenants, find creative, equitable, and durable solutions so that everyone can move forward and be back in business. So that's a little bit about the process. Let me just tell you a little bit about me. I've been mediating for about 22 years. I first started off as Associate General Counsel at JAMS, which is a large mediation and arbitration provider. And I started off there, and then I moved into mediating full time. I've mediated pretty much every type of case you can imagine. I have a specialty in commercial litigation and mediation. So all kinds of real estate matters, from, high stakes real estate stuff to, homeowners associations and sort of everything in between. And so I really look forward to helping everyone. Our stock and trade is neutrality as mediators. So we really hope to, like I said, help you all find creative and durable solutions, and in a confidential process. So thank you so much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. We're going to turn it now to RJ Mulligan with Peacemakers. RJ, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Hi, Jen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. So I have been a civil trial lawyer for 30 years, and am very familiar with the rules of evidence, what happens in litigation, and the risks involved there. I started Peacemakers Mediation in 2012 because I actually got very burnt out on constantly being in a battle, constantly being angry and at war and litigating, and saw the personal toll that it took on me. And so I went back to school. I got a master's degree in applied or spiritual psychology and started Peacemakers, where the point of it is really to facilitate an open communication and get people to feel safe enough to speak their truth. When you're mad, the first thing that happens is a lot of people just shut down, and so the facilitation is really important, just to be able to create an environment to speak your truth and to feel safe, knowing that it's completely confidential. It's a voluntary process, but if you're so inclined, you do have the capacity to come out of this with a signed agreement that gives both sides a great deal of security. So I'm still practicing law. I'm also a mediator approved for the California Association of Realtors, and also for all California courts. So I'm on their panel when cases are about to go to trial. So I'm a graduate of the Strauss Institute at Pepperdine. So I've been doing mediations for a long time. I have a practice, and it's something that I believe is so beautiful, because it's the only exception in the law where you can actually speak your truth and never worry about anyone throwing it back in your face. It's confidential, and you'll sign an agreement that it's confidential. And so it's a pause and a timeout before things escalate, to be able to really work something out. And, truly right now, these are such unprecedented times where, my focus is on helping people maintain valuable relationships. Don't go to war. Don't press the button, the red button that is litigation, that blows up relationships. Now more than ever, relationships are so important. And I'm amazed and thrilled that the city of West Hollywood is actually paying for this for you to do for free. So I really do invite you to take advantage of this amazing opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. I'm going to turn it back to our moderator now, Tara Warden, to go into our Q&A. So Tara.
Hello. Yes. Sorry, I was muted. Okay, so if there are questions in the queue, I can always think of some. So
Tara,
let's see.
I actually have one on here. So
You
maybe
have
this
some.
is for, yeah, maybe this is for Jen or maybe the mediators. So once either a tenant or a landlord submit the intake form, how long does it take until they receive a response from someone notifying them that they have an appointment?
So we're on the website. I think I have to look, but I think we put less than 48 hours. So 2 business days. If you contact us on a Friday, we hope to get back to you by Monday or Tuesday. So 2 business days, I would say. But it should be a quick turnaround, quicker than that.
Great. And then there was a question on here if this is for commercial tenants or residential tenants as well. I'll just take that one. And this is for commercial tenants. There are services available for residential tenants that are available by going to www.weho.org/coronavirus, where you can go under renter resources, and there are tons of resources for rent repayment, as well as the residential moratorium on the website as well.
There was a question here on that I think is a mediator's question or maybe a city question from Alicia. Paula?
Yes, I'm just reading that now. So the question is, give us a sense of what you believe will happen when a commercial landlord, instead of putting a commercial tenant in default for lack of payment of rent, invokes the use of the security deposit to cover rent and then issues a notice to repay the security deposit or face eviction. So that is an interesting sort of switcheroo, certainly not in the spirit of the ordinance. I would say that is a violation of the terms of the ordinance, but I am not a Esquire or any terms of legal. So I would defer to the 2 mediators on the line to see, at first glance, or I know you're limited in terms of the information that you can provide to everyone on the call today. But if you could just.
RJ was nodding her head there. RJ, you want to jump in?
Well, if I may, yes, indeed, that would be a direct violation of the ordinance. And, the city of West Hollywood has determined that any such violations are actually punishable as set forth in Chapter 2.80 of the West Hollywood Municipal Code, which is basically that it shall be a misdemeanor. Punishable by fine of $1,000 or not to exceed $1,000, or by imprisonment for a term not to exceed 6 months, or both, for any person during this emergency who willfully violates these ordinances. So we understand that everybody is really pressed and nervous and afraid, and that people may do things just out of fear that are not in the spirit of this ordinance of working together to actually keep businesses open and keep the keep West Hollywood open. But for those who would deal in bad faith, there are definite consequences.
Thank you, RJ. I also wanted to say Skip in chat was talking about a tenant ignoring his attempts to negotiate, and I'm just letting him know that please reach out to me. I'll give you my email, and then we'll see what we can do to try to get your tenant to the table, because I think this is a great opportunity for both you and he. And the ordinance does require that the rents get paid back, so it behooves him to really work with you as a landlord. So I'll put my email in the chat for people. Are there more questions, Colin?
I think this is a pretty quiet group here today. I don't see questions in the chat or the questions tab here.
If I could follow up on something on the previous question, the only exception to that circumstance that Tara brought up is if this particular business isn't subject to the ordinance. And as you know, the state and county health officials have ordered most commercial businesses to close, and restaurants are limited to takeout and delivery only. But if there is a business that falls outside of the ordinance, then obviously there'd be no punishment for a landlord not following the terms of the ordinance.
Right.
There's a good question here from Alicia. What is being done to encourage landlord and tenants to use this service? How wonderful of you all to give this presentation. But so, I think that, you know, one thing from us as the mediators I'd like to share is that if, in terms of encouraging, let's just say, you know, hopefully both parties will come linked arms to want to do this together. But if for some reason only one side submits, we can also call the other party to try to help to get them to the table and encourage them to participate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Kim, because as you saw in the intake form that I went through, and feel free to go on the site yourself while we're talking, WehoChamber.com/mediation service right up here on the screen. And you'll see on the intake form that it'll say, you know, the party requesting, and then you're giving the information for the other party. The mediator will then take it from there of trying to get everyone to the table. That's part of the process. So that was a really good point. Thank you. Thank both of our mediators. And I think there was another one there. Shall I?
Yes.
Go
And
ahead.
I think this is probably going to be best for Tara in regards to the 6 months to pay arrangement. Is there a payment schedule, or is it all due at the end of 6 months?
So those are the terms that we encourage you to work out with your landlord on an individual basis, and that's the whole reason. You know, if you can't reach terms that are agreeable to both parties, then you have these great mediators as a resource to you to be able to help in that conversation. You do have 6 months. I want to be clear. I think there was some confusion because we do also have a residential eviction moratorium that does not allow anybody to be removed from their apartment or home during this time for reasons of non-payment. And that repayment period is a 12-month repayment. The time period for the commercial eviction moratorium, which is what we're here talking about, is the 6-month repayments. And I think I mentioned this when I was first doing the orientation of the ordinance, that we do anticipate sort of potential changes to the ordinance language. You know, we see that the city council has already extended the time period, and it could be likely that if we know that the business community is really struggling and is unable to repay the rent within the 6 months, that it could be extended to another 12 months. And that is not the case right now, but it could happen. I don't have my magic ball out or crystal ball, so I don't have any
and just
tellings.
Yeah, and just reiterating what Tara said is, you know, I've heard a landlord say that he'd give a tenant 12 months. So, you know, the ordinance is 6 minimum, but you can always work with your landlord on a year and a half, you know, whatever it is that every business is different. It's not a one size fits all. And I think that's the beauty of the ordinance a little bit, is that on one hand, people might not call it the beauty of the ordinance because it's not specific enough, but on the other hand, it gives you a lot of room to negotiate for both sides so that the government isn't overreaching and dictating to you how to do this, but it's saying, here's the parameters, try to work within them or even exceed them if you can.
It seems like there's a few more questions that have just popped up that I think we could address. And this question comes from Nicholas Dice. What if a landlord refuses to take our security deposit as payment? If they do, when does the security deposit need to be replenished? So that security deposit, if you agree to the use of the security deposit for your rent payment, that would need to be replenished within that 6-month repayment period. So it would sort of act as that loan for you as you're using it as a rent, and then when you are able to repay that and replenish it, it would need to be within that 6-month time period.
There's a-
Additional questions. I think we have another question from Athleo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name correctly, but he states, what incentive does the landlord have to negotiate a reduced repayment or lengthen terms of repayment? From the city's perspective, the incentive, the landlord's incentive is to keep business in operation. And I think that is sort of the underlying motivation for the city to put an ordinance in place like this to protect our business community. We don't know the sort of severity of the crisis at hand right now. We could bounce back. I've seen sort of optimistic projections that within the next couple of months we could be back on track, and sort of really grim projections that this could be a much longer scenario that we find ourselves in. So if the latter is the case, and the landlord is not willing to budge on the lease agreement and the payment that was entered, the agreement that was entered into pre-COVID, then you have you run the risk of losing your tenant, and they could leave. And then if you try to rent your space, lease your space at a market rate, or what you're projecting to be a market rate, that could also not be an incentive for any new businesses to move in.
Yeah, I think just to add a point to that, it's a different day than it used to be, when you're able to turn over that business a little quicker. I would be hard pressed to see businesses moving in very quickly, and so you really run that risk. It really behooves you to really try to work with the tenant. And I think on both sides, the tenants have compassion for the landlords in some cases, and vice versa. And there's been out of different cities where tenants have been successful to negotiate with their landlords. A tenant will say, I'll help pay the property tax, but I need help with this, so there's a lot of room for negotiation here with our mediators as well. I think there's a couple more.
Yeah, I have a question here from Carolyn. So if a tenant refuses to pay rent and the tenant has received a PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, what is the landlord option?
I think that for those of you who are on the call and you're likely familiar with the PPP, if you've been engaged in this whole world of post-COVID recovery, you're familiar that the split breakdown of the PPP changing from a loan to a grant, it does require that you spend a certain percentage of that loan on rent and a certain percentage of that loan on your payroll to pay your employees. That 25% rent. I know a lot of people have found that very difficult and a bit constricting in terms of they're not operating. You have 8 weeks to get this in order, and if there's no reason to hire payroll employees back if there's no work to be done. So that's sort of a separate conversation about the application of the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. But the impact, that does not have a true bearing.
By everybody.
I'm sorry.
Living under the contract there.
So if the tenant has received a PPP and they have also obviously been impacted by the crisis at hand, then the terms of the ordinance do apply to them, and they are eligible for the protection. So they aren't forced to spend that. They're likely operating with their business sense in mind to try to get that loan to shift to a grant. So their hands are tied to spend that 25% on rent. Otherwise, they are eligible for the protections provided in the ordinance.
Great. And then I don't think we answered this one, but a question comes in here from Charles. And they said, what if the market value of the property goes down and the landlord is not willing to negotiate a rent reduction?
that kind of touches on an earlier question, something similar to what's the incentive for the landlord to renegotiate lease agreements, and if ultimately if the value of the property decreases and the value of the rent is no longer at sort of what was market rate, then you're going to have difficulty getting a new tenant in the space and likely could lose the current tenant. So I think that's the real trigger on the landlord side, is that they do need to respond to the market forces. And honestly, if that could really impact their the rent rate.
Great. I think those are all the questions from everyone here today. Before we go, does anyone have any closing thoughts?
I would just say I would invite everyone to look at RJ and my's. We have websites that are on the intake form, and so welcome to look at our websites as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, I'll just, you go ahead, RJ, and then I'll comment on what Alicia asked about how we're getting the service out to people, but go ahead.
It's really just kind of going back to Charles's question. I see this actually as a big issue where you're stuck in a lease, which is a binding contract, and the value of the property plummets because of the market. What do? It's similar to people being stuck in bad mortgages. And, everything is negotiable. This is not a new problem. And people have been working through these kinds of problems for a long, long time. And I'm sure if we all, approach this in the spirit of cooperation, valuing our relationships with one another, our business, and the city of West Hollywood, we can do this.
Thanks, RJ. And Kim, I think you're about to answer this question that just popped up.
Yeah, we've got another question here, which is a really great question. Is this mediation the same as binding arbitration? Answer is no. Binding arbitration it's very similar to going to court, except there would be an arbitrator. You would submit your case to the arbitrator, and they would make a binding decision. The difference in mediation is that RJ and I will facilitate a negotiation, and then if there is an agreement, then we will reduce it to a binding agreement. But it's the parties are empowered to negotiate and come up with the agreement on their own. There's nobody imposing that agreement, and that's what happens in arbitration. Somebody will impose their decision. So we'll come up with a collaborative decision, and then we will reduce it to, we will memorialize it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why mediation is so fabulous, because the decisions that you reach, the solution that you reach is yours. It's not being put upon you from an outside decision maker. So it's collaborative and creative, and really, this is a remarkable opportunity. I really invite you to take advantage of it.
Thank you. And just Alicia asked a question about how we're getting this to, and thank you for that question. We're going to be pushing this out through social media, through website, online. We also have some emails that we'll be sending out. A lot of the businesses have already reached out to me that want to participate in this. And so please, you have my email in the chat, gmoral@WehoChamber.com. There's also you can send me a note in the website intake form. Or on the website, there's a place to put a note to send me. It comes directly to me. And I just really want to thank the City of West Hollywood and Paulo and Tara. They've been really working their tails off. It's been pretty remarkable how much this city is doing and stepping up for our community, and I just really am grateful, and I want to thank them, and I want to thank our mediators who immediately said yes to me. So thank you so much. This great team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen,
Great.
and thank you everyone
All right,
who
take care.
participated.
Thank you, everyone, for joining at the West Hollywood COVID-19 webinar series. As always, please continue to stay up to date with us by visiting our social media outlets and our website. All the information is on the screen. Take care, everyone, and have a great day.
Hi, guys. Now do we just, oh.